Transition words for essays. Comparison, contrast. On one hand, on the other hand, still, yet, however, in spite of, despite, because of, at the same time, nevertheless, on the contrary. Example: still, it would be a terrible waste of tomatoes, so we won't pelt the politicians. Many students of English have to write papers. They may know a subject well, and maybe they even have a reasonably good English vocabulary. But their papers still are difficult to read, and writing a paper that's difficult to read is a good way to get a bad grade. Why does this happen? Often it's because the writer has failed to use good transition words. Transition words help lead the reader from one idea to another, and they make your writing and even your thinking more coherent and logical. Practice these transition words, and you'll find that your writing will improve. Are you ready? Beginning. To begin with, first, generally speaking, to be sure, once upon a time, in the first place, on the one hand, ordinarily. Example: generally speaking, the concept that all politicians are extroverts is a fallacy. Division. So then, this is why, granted, this can be seen in, example, granted, the way politics forces people in the office to behave can be misleading. Subdivision. Also, for that matter, yet. Example: for that matter, politics is simply misleading. Accent or highlight a point. Certainly. Usually. As a rule. Admittedly. In this situation. Example: usually that market sold 2 types of tomatoes. Accent or highlight with a touch of drama, seeming to stop the show. Above all, unquestionably, undoubtedly, obviously. Example: unquestionably, that market sold the best tomatoes. Control time. Also, next, last. Generally. For now, later on. Additionally. In the meantime, last. Indeed, by and large. Finally. Example. Generally, politicians deserve to be pelted with tomatoes from that market. They can deal with cleaning their suits later on. Highlight instances. Chiefly. Illustrated by. Including. This has been seen in. An example of this is. Example. Chiefly, irritating politicians with too much tan and bad hair deserve to be pelted with tomatoes. Comparison, contrast. On one hand, on the other hand. Still. Yet. However. In spite of. Despite. Because of. At the same time. Nevertheless. On the contrary. Example. Still, it would be a terrible waste of tomatoes, so we won't pelt the politicians. Yet another. Furthermore. Also. Additionally. Indeed. Correspondingly. Another thing. Likewise. Example. Indeed, we need tomatoes right now. Politicians, not as much. Cause, effect. Since. Afterward. Consequently. Accordingly. Due to. This is why. Following. In effect. Under these circumstances. For all of these reasons. Wherefore. Therefore. Example. Under these circumstances, I believe we need to ignore politicians and grow tomatoes. Concluding. Finally. To sum up. Overall. To summarize. Taking everything into account. All things considered. Ultimately. Given these points. On the whole. That is to say, in the final analysis. Briefly. Example, on the whole, people miss the opportunity to enjoy leisure. Do's. Change transitions as you change ideas. Read through what you have written several times. Make sure the transitions you have used are appropriate and make sense. Have an idea of what direction you wish to go with your writing before you start. That way, when you use a transition, it is more likely to be in a place that works. Don'ts. Keep repeating a transition. Keep adding more and more transitions in the same sentence or paragraph, thinking that more is best. Use them when and where they are needed, and try to keep how many transitions you use to a reasonable amount. Throw a transition into your writing without knowing its true meaning and proper usage. Now you have the tools to make your essay fit together well, just like joints in a piece of woodwork. Generally speaking, your writing will be better if you use these.